what is a holographic universe?
Exactly.
You've been probably to Disney, and you've probably been in the haunted house, and you've probably seen, it can be faces, it can be people dancing. Those are holograms, and the way it's done, you take a laser and you do actually a reference laser, and then you take another laser, and you photograph you with a laser from 2 or 3 different points of view, and you end up with an interference pattern that can be fed into a computer, and it will project out perfect replica of you using light.
Right. Even though I'm really not there, or am I?
No, you've been photographed. But here is the key. This is the key to everything that we'll discuss. The projector cannot be in the same room with the holograms.
Why not?
Mathematically, it does not work. So now, think about this. When you're at Disney and you're seeing the holograms that are out in front of you, it's being projected by something you do not see. So the magic is, here is this world that takes place in front of you, like magic.
Like magic.
And the truth is, if you say Disney is the cosmos, there is a projector. And that projector is working with lasers and lights, but it is projecting a world that to our minds looks real. Even if it glows, you get the sense that you are watching something that is almost like a reflection of something on the earth.
Who created that?
Well, now we get into this whole issue of, if the projector has to be in another dimension, which dimension? Who runs that dimension?
Exactly.
Now, one of the most fascinating interviews I've ever done was in 2007 with Jerry Wills. He's down in Phoenix. He takes trips to Peru. He's married to a woman, Kathy. They got married back in 1998 in the fall. And one of the things that he most wanted to do, and he wanted his new bride to be with him, he wanted to go down to a place called Aramu Muru, A-R-A-M-U-M-U-R-U. And that's where the Aymara Indians live. It's in the southwestern part of Lake Titicaca. Here's Peru, here's the Bolivian border. They share this border, almost right where this is. What is Aramu Muru? It is a solid, red, beautiful rock. Gorgeous. And carved in it, think of a rectangle that goes 23 feet up here, 23. Then, when you come down to the ground, here is another door, goes into the rock deeper. It's about 7 feet. A 6'9" man can, with it bowing his head a little, can go in there. But there is no entrance. It's just carved into this red rock, surrounded by this 23-foot rectangle. And it's the Aymara Indians, for centuries, they have said...
They made this?
No, no, no. The Indians have said this was made by gods to be a two-dimensional, going and coming doorway to where the gods live. Jerry had studied, and he had a guide named Pedro, one of the Aymara Indians, who said on this trip with his bride as a celebration that he would take Jerry and teach him how to get down on his knees, put his forehead in this little, kind of like a, I've seen a picture, it just looks like the rock goes in like this, like a lens shape. Right. Puts the forehead in there, and the shaman taught him a sound frequency said with symbols. Jerry has shared it with me and has asked me never ever to repeat it. And that if Jerry got his forehead and did this chanting of this frequency just correctly, he would literally disappear and would go to another dimension, the dimension of where the gods live, and hopefully come back.
I was going to ask, can you come back?
So His wife is 100 feet away. She is watching the entire scene. Jerry gets down on his knees. He leans forward with his forehead. He puts it in the rock. Many, many times he says this frequency. And then she sees him disappear, literally disappears. And we have, I think, what happens next with Jerry. We can at least share his words. He goes to a white place. It's like a laboratory. It has a hard floor. And a voice comes in, a male voice.
Is he scared when this is happening?
He has no idea what's happened. He was there at the rock, and then it's all white, but his feet are on something he compared to Lexan. He tried to jump on it, and then this male voice comes and starts talking to him. And this is where we have an excerpt.
Well, let's listen.
He said that I was on another world, that it was outside of my universe. So I wanted to understand how that's possible. And he says, well, there are many universes, and you've just passed from yours into ours. All right, so where is this universe? He said, it wouldn't do me any good to even try to explain it to you. I asked him how I'd gotten there. Well, apparently, whoever they are had been very curious about the nature of the universe. They tried to recreate a model of the universe. He was talking about how they were colliding particles, and somehow a spark had occurred, and the spark didn't go away. Instead, it started growing. And as it grew, it started accumulating and creating more of itself on its own. It was quite large, and they had created another universe. They weren't planning on doing this. And it had evolved, and it evolved quite rapidly. I said, well, I don't understand this, because we think the universe is billions and billions of years old. He says, well, where you are, you measure time much differently. Time is different in every universe. And when he was telling me about this, they were really very afraid that it was going to continue growing and it would just overwhelm them, and then what would happen to them. And that what they had discovered is that they were inside of someone else's universe, just like we were inside of theirs. He says it's just layers and layers. There's very little that separates one from the other. And they had learned that life had started to populate throughout that universe.
They had made.
Yeah, they were fascinated by this, curious as can be how this was possible. And this doorway that I had gone through was something that they had put in place. They had these doorways throughout our universe in various places. They had been sending scientists in there to study the universe, because this was a whole new realm of science for them to explore. And when they started discovering life in there, well, they were pretty shocked. Apparently, I'm not the only person who'd ever come through that doorway. And apparently, these doorways go to other places on this planet as well as to other planets. The only thing that I can figure is that moving from one point to another was outside the dynamic of time altogether. That these doorways are instantaneous passageways to other places.
That's fascinating.
Well, and that last statement, doorways that could be instantaneous to other dimensions placed around this planet. And if Good is right at Harvard, he's been speculating this for a couple of decades, that we're not just a universe with a trillion galaxies and that this is it, that there could be an infinite number of galaxies, an infinite number of universes, an infinite number of dimensions. And that part where the voice is telling Jerry that they discovered, whoever the they is, that their universe has another dimension that is encompassing it, or another universe, and they're encompassing this one, and we could be encompassing another, all of a sudden you have this idea of those Russian dolls that are all embedded in each other, that this cosmos could be universes inside of each other going on, and suddenly the whole issue of why is it that some people have seen blazing white crosses in their life that have saved them, or somebody is falling off of a cliff and they say it felt like Jello came and lifted them up. There have been the miracles of this planet.
I've had calls on Coast to Coast, Linda, where people are ready to crash to a vehicle and they go right through it.
Yes, or over it.
Or over it.
In abductees. I've heard that so many times, and I have an illustration in my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, where a mother and daughter, and the daughter is the abductee, and they are traveling on, she'd already had interactions since she was a teenager with all kinds of ETs. And they apparently were trying to help her. They were trying to help her survive. And so it would have been counterproductive to the non-humans and their effort to keep her alive from disease if she would die in a car crash. That's the way she analyzed it. So she and her mother are coming and they're entering the intersection, and they both see a car coming at them at the same time.
They're done, right? They're supposed to be done.
And she said it was as if their car rose vertically up and went over the car that should have hit them, came down on the other side, and both the mother and daughter knew that something real had happened.
Yes.
It had saved their lives. But how many humans go to other humans and tell stories like that because humans are so afraid of ridicule from other humans?
And what about the car that almost hit them? What were they thinking?
Were they even conscious, or did they get a blast of white light? Well, this now leads to new work that is being done by a physicist named Thomas Campbell and some people literally at Caltech. It was in February. I spent an entire day with a mathematician at Caltech and a friend of Professor Campbell's. And we were talking about all of this whole issue, are we living in a simulated universe? Because this mathematician that I talked to, they're actually now trying to come up with what are tests that human scientists can do right now or through the rest of this year and maybe next. They have to get collaboration from other large labs internationally to do some of the things they want to do. But they are now, there's so many people that are intent on trying to test this, because whether it is a holographic universe, and a hologram is the projector that is projecting light and creating, Thomas Campbell thinks that we don't even need the holography, that we could have another dimension that is projecting zeros and ones, literally, zeros and ones, which would be minuses and pluses, that are programmed, that are already programmed from another dimension.
But who's programming this?
Okay. I asked Professor Campbell, I said, okay, is the projector in another dimension God?
Good question.
And he said, well, if we're in a cosmos that has an infinite number of universes, which dimension would be a top dimension? Where do you get to a point if there are all of these Russian dolls of universes and dimensions? Which would there be any one that would be top? And this is where you then get to this discussion. I myself have always thought there's a divine field that is not matter at all. It's an energy and a frequency.
Obviously something out there.
It produces all the matter worlds that have all of the dimensions, which if you take a chord of music, this helps me think about this. And let's say that you go middle C, E, and G.
Hum it for us, Linda.
I can't do a chord for you. Maybe you can.
Maybe I can. I sing.
But if we were in middle C, and Jerry's universe is E, and there's another universe dimension that's F, unless you could produce the exact frequency of the E and the G dimensions or universes, you're never even going to be able to detect. You will not know anything. And they could be that close as frequencies of music. This is getting close to what I think the reality is and what physicists talk about.
Did you ever think you would be thinking about this today? Because when we grew up in school, Linda, when you and I grew up in school, we thought of this universe as the universe.
Yeah.
Hard facts, how it was created, that's debatable. I still haven't gotten my explanation for the Big Bang. But did you ever think you'd be talking about a holographic universe?
The first time that I ever heard this was on an airliner flying with Bud Hopkins.
The late Bud Hopkins.
Goes back to 1991. And it was that spring, a book came out called The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot.
As a matter of fact, since you bring that up, let's take a look at that right now.
University of London physicist named was a former protege of Einstein, and a Stanford University neurophysiologist named Karl Pribram. And they worked independently. Pribram was studying memory and found that there's evidence that the brain operates holographically. And Bohm was studying subatomic physics and found that on the subatomic level, the fabric of reality seems to possess properties that are reminiscent of a hologram. So if you put those two ideas together, that our brain seems to be holographic and the universe is holographic, it suggests that maybe it's compelling evidence that the universe may be a kind of hologram, not that it's literally a hologram, but that it's a good metaphor or way of understanding the universe. A hologram has an unusual property. If you take a piece of photographic film that has a holographic image encoded in it, that means that you cannot see the image with your naked eye. You have to reconstruct the image, you have to shine a laser through it. So if you have an image of a rose in the film, shine a laser through the rose, you'll get a three-dimensional image of the rose on the other side. You cut that film in half, shine a laser through each piece, you'll get a whole rose out of each piece, which is a very unusual property and sort of boggles the imagination at first. Cut it in 4, you get 4 roses. Cut it in 8, you get 8 roses. So if the universe is a hologram, it means, as William Blake said, that quite literally you can find the universe in a grain of sand, that every portion of the universe contains some semblance of the whole universe.
But now, he just said may not be literal. Now the physics is moving toward literal
it's
hologram. And what is so interesting about that 1991 experience with Bud, we had both been speaking at a conference. This book, The Holographic Universe, had just come out. So Bud and I are talking together on the airline going back. I lived in Philly and he lived in New York. And he leaned over and he said, I want to tell you something confidentially. At the time in 1991. He said, Michael Talbot is one of my abductee cases.
Wow.
And
who would have known that?
No, nobody knew then. Nobody knew for a long time till I have started saying this just recently on Coast and at Earth Files and now on with this show with you and Beyond Belief, that Bud was saying about the discussion he had with Michael Talbot, that the entire book, The Holographic Universe, was a telepathic download during his experiences and interactions with non-humans. And he told Bud, he said, I don't want anybody to know this.
He never wrote that in the book.
No. And he said, I don't want anybody to know this because then they won't think the book is credible, because back in 91, it was worse than any time.
It was woo-woo then.
Exactly. Today, that's what's so exciting about all of these new papers and studies, that the holographic universe is increasingly, I'm going to step out and say, with testing, we could learn in the next year or two that the evidence is that we are in a holographic universe, which leads again to your question, who's doing the projecting? Could there be multiple projectors between different dimensions and universes? Is this cosmos teeming with advanced life that could be doing this? But Professor Campbell and I both feel the same way. There is a divine non-matter field, and that the key to why this universe might be as it is, with a yin and yang symbol as a metaphor, darkness in the light, light in the dark, a kind of yin and yang, would be, and this is his term, Professor Campbell thinks that this universe was made to be an entropy reduction trainer for souls.
If you like this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.